something drastically wrong in the way he's been managing this party, although there is massive potential for us to do very well. At the same time, he's dragged the membership down from last year, when it was approaching 15,000 just after the general election, to about 8,500. By the time this leadership contest takes place, it'll almost certainly be down to about 7,500 or even less, probably 7,000. The new inquiries have gone down to a tiny trickle. As I said, he is withering the party away to how it was when he first took it over. He's taking it back 10 years. He's taking the party back 10 or more years. He's got people as his main advisor now is Pat Harrington. Now, those who've got a longer memory will know Pat Harrington was with Nick Griffin in they took over the National Front in '86 together. There was a schism in the National Front. They took it over in '86. And the National Front in those days was bigger than the BNP. That was when I joined the BNP. And from having the biggest party, within 4 years, Nick Griffin and Harrington reduced it to a couple of hundred people, a tiny little clique. And that's Harrington. That's his main advisor now. Now, Richard said, this is another thing I just mentioned, Richard gave you had the audit in there, didn't you? This audit that Richard had in here, it gives the figures as at December, the 31st of December 2009. Right? The auditor said we weren't a going concern, or we're in danger of not being a going concern, effectively, didn't he? 31st of December 2009, not 31st of December 2010. That is a year and a half, getting on for a year and a half out of date. We've had a lot more expenditure and a lot less income since then. If the party is an unincorporated association, and it's difficult to pin down debts on an unincorporated association, it's a bit more of a nebulous sort of thing than a company. If we were a company, a proper company that had to submit proper accounts, we would certainly be in liquidation by now. He's only getting away with it little by little because it's such a nebulous situation and people are reluctant to press the button because they've got to pay. To put someone into bankruptcy, you've got to pay. It doesn't just happen automatically. You've got to pay to put someone into bankruptcy. And people don't want to chuck good money after bad. That's about the only reason why he's getting away with it, but it is all coming on top because there is much more expenditure coming and there's these big court cases that he's got to face. There's also the possibility that he could be put in jail. Richard Barnbrook, who was the agent in the Barking election last year, he ended up in court quite recently. When was it? 2 months ago, roughly, because his election expenses hadn't been paid. And the printer, one of these nationalist printers I was telling you about earlier, went to it, we're going to Richard Barnbrook, we want you to pay because you're the agent. You signed off the election paperwork saying you'd paid this bill, and you haven't. We want you to pay us. And he went rather ill-advisedly. I don't know, he's got someone who's an advisor who's not a very good advisor of his. And he went to court. He went to court to have himself struck off as being liable for this debt, even though he was the agent. And the judge said that isn't ignorance of the fact that you were told the thing was paid when it hadn't been paid isn't a valid defence. There's only about 2 valid defences for this sort of thing. And just being ignorant of the fact and taking it on someone's say-so wasn't a valid defence. So the judge had no option but to find him, not to allow him to be struck off from responsibility for this debt. And because it was brought to his attention, he felt obliged to hand the file to the Director of Public Prosecutions because he had signed a false statement on his return of election expenses. Now, the judge said to Richard Barnbrook that, I feel a bit sorry for you. I can see that you weren't maliciously telling lies on your paperwork. But I've got no option. You've committed it's called a corrupt practice. I've got to send the file to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, the candidate who also has to sign off the paperwork was Nick Griffin, obviously. And it doesn't count for the council candidates because the material, luckily, because for me as well, the material was parliamentary election material, not councillor election material. And so it's Nick Griffin. But it was parliamentary material, and it was really about Hodge and this sort of stuff. And I think it was the newspapers that we produced. We produced these special newspapers. And the company that produced these special newspapers on our behalf was not paid, and they initiated the action. And now, Richard Barnbrook, the penalty for this, for a corrupt practice, it's called a corrupt practice, is you won't be able to stand for 5 years, and you're thrown out of public office if you hold a public office, such as being a London Assembly member or an MEP, and you're not allowed to stand for 5 years. You can get up to £5,000 worth of fine, and you can go to jail for a year. Now, Richard Barnbrook isn't going to go to jail for a year because he was just a patsy in this. He signed it off. It's mandatory that you lose the seat if you're an elected official, and it's mandatory you're not allowed to stand for 5 years. That's mandatory. The non-mandatory bit is how much fine there might be. I don't think Richard Barnbrook would get a big fine because, again, as I say, he wasn't being deliberate in what he did, and he didn't deliberately tell lies, so he's no real chance. He won't go to jail. Nick Griffin is in a much more different situation. He knows exactly what's going on in this party. He would have known that those things hadn't been paid. He knows everything about this party. He controls everything. The treasurers aren't real treasurers. He is the controller of everything in this party. And there is actually, whenever this case actually gets to court, and the judge said that he'd have to involve Nick Griffin in the case, that he could go to jail for it. He's certainly going to have his image wrecked even more when this comes to court. And I'll come back again. This constitution that Richard mentioned has given him so much power that he's incredibly difficult to get rid of from this party. But these things I'm telling you about, such as the Barnbrook case, the Richard Barnbrook case, the bankruptcies, these will, if it doesn't happen before the leadership contest, they'll happen this year and severely weaken him. This constitution has got to be changed of priority. There's another thing, he promised an EGM last year to vote on a more democratic constitution. Hopefully that might happen. He might conceivably be forced to do that. There are potentially legal things we can do to get him to change the constitution. But these are things which the party's going to be facing. This is going to be the backdrop to the leadership contest. Will be with Nick Griffin in court virtually all the time, with very poor advisors, very poor team around him, and this is what gives actually Richard a bit of a chance, because these court cases will be played out in the public domain in front of the entire membership, because the media are going to latch onto these things, and that is what's going to probably help get Richard the signatures to get his campaign off the ground in the first place. Thank you.
Well done, Eddy.